Hello, this is the September 16th, 2020 Creating Growth Successful Parenting Group. Your hosts are Jacqueline Rhew and Robin Choquette. Jacqueline and Robin are co-authors of the Successful Parenting Workbook. Combined, they have over 35 years working with professionals and parents. They have provided over 400 training sessions both locally and nationally on a wide array of topics relating to parenting strategies and raising resilient children through goal-directed parenting. Their approach to purposeful parenting has helped hundreds of parents develop plans that are unique to their families, as well as gain confidence in their parenting strategies, which lead to healthy and successful young adults. Topic for this group is parenting with a growth mindset, improving performance for academics, athletics, and beyond. The guest experts are Candice and Paul Fabry. Candice and Paul discuss the role parents have on influencing their children to have a growth mindset when approaching academics and extracurricular activities. They provide actionable strategies and tools for parents to aid children in developing a mindset to improve performance. Thank you, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
Coaching instructors, and all of those hats we've worn through the last several years has always dealt with players and coaches and always parents. You don't get away from parents in sports. And both of us having the experience from coaching little 3-year-olds all the way up to collegiate athletes at the Division I level. We feel like this topic, calling us experts might be a little nervous for us that we feel like that, but at the same time, when we kind of look back at everything that we have done and how we want to continue to help move the game forward, this topic of growth mindset is really important to us. So soccer's in general, if you're not familiar with the game, the biggest thing I tell you is go watch the Women's World Cup team, because the US is really good and the men aren't, obvious reasons. Women are better. So a few things just so you guys know a little bit about us. We played soccer in college. We are licensed coaches, which means we go and do licensing courses and try to develop ourselves as both coaches and directors of clubs. We also now teach coaching licenses at the grassroots level. So that is the hope and the impact is we're reaching about 20,000 coaches plus a year with these courses. We work with players in an identification program called the Olympic Development Program. And that program both is a state level and a regional level to identify players for future national teams. So working in that environment is pretty stressful when you talk about performance. We're both currently working for state associations, which comes with the advantage of seeing the game at a broader scale. But at the end of the day, we're a mom and dad. We have a 10-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter, and I'm just glad I remembered her age on the spot, because the second one, I can never remember name, age, lucky to hit the gender. But yeah, so that's just a little bit about us. So for tonight, we are going to ask for interaction, and part of that is just because that's who we are. When we're coaching on the field, we're rarely just talking to ourselves. We are interacting with parents, players, and so on. So if you'd be so kind to kind of entertain me and Paul with getting to know a little bit about you in terms of your own mindset. So hopefully you can see the directions on the screen. You're going to visit this website. You can do that from your computer or your phone. And then you're going to click the login button at the upper right-hand corner. You're going to choose student login when you get there. And then you're going to type in Fabry class. It automatically does the uppercase for you, so you don't have to worry about that. So if you don't mind kind of entertaining us and interacting in that capacity, that'd be really great. Once you enter, the activity will be right there for you to start kind of answering some questions a little bit to give us an idea on kind of maybe your mindset. And the questions really pertain to who you are. You're not talking about your kid yet. You're not talking about your spouse. You're talking about yourself. Answer them in your beliefs. So we've got a couple people coming in. I appreciate that. So if you're just joining and kind of getting, I know a few people have popped in. We're just doing, it's not a quiz, so don't panic. This is not anything that, you know, you're getting graded on. We're just kind of getting an idea of where people are with their mindset when we talk about growth versus fixed and where we're at currently with the group. Awesome, some few people joining us, so good. Hopefully you can read the questions and you just select one, the answer that you think you agree with most, the statement. Awesome, we get more people. Thank you guys, this is awesome. And as we go through the rest of the presentation, Paul and I are so used to being put on the spot, not by just adults, but our children. I can think of some of the last most embarrassing questions that maybe I won't repeat because this is being used for potential future, and we don't need to call our kids out for asking really kid questions.
Maybe later. We'll get to that.
We've got 9 people. Awesome, guys. If you can join us, I'm going to hit to the next question. So hopefully you see something new. Go ahead and answer that one for me if you can. Again, same thing. Which statement do you agree with more? Just 2 questions. Just choose it. Awesome. You guys are nailing it. And I only got 1 more. It's not too painful, hopefully. And last statement, let us know. And what we're going to do is I'm going to hand it over to the Vanna White of the group. So Paul will talk a little bit while I kind of look at the scores and we kind of get an idea of where do you guys sit and what that means for mindset as we kind of move forward and hopefully facilitate this discussion with you guys being a little bit vulnerable, maybe sharing some of your stories with us. So, good. All right, awesome. Thank you guys.
All right. As we kind of transition slides here, please notice there are 2 images, 2 photos up on the screen. First of all, shout out to Bob Ross. I love trees as much as Bob does. Hopefully you do too. But as you're viewing these pictures, kind of see what you notice, what kind of pops out to you, and kind of start to consider how it might connect to a growth mindset.
You can add those in the chat.
Oh yeah, chat. Get that going. Sorry, I missed my cue.
And I will say, I probably should have acknowledged and appreciate Jackie. And it's hard for me to call Dr. Robin because I actually knew her prior to the doctor stuff. So I'm still trying to add that into how I reference her. But thank you guys for hosting us and allowing us to kind of share some of that knowledge tonight. So
she does, however, make me call her doctor on a regular basis. So I'll be my best.
Again, so. We've known her much earlier than the doctor phase.
This is what you get. All right, so insert those into the chat, kind of take a look at those visuals. Consider not just the mindset, we'll kind of give Robin a second to kind of gather a few things, but kind of as you're typing things in, the other side of this whole process regarding growth mindset is finding ways to connect with your kids or any kid and start to kind of maybe use imagery or analogies to kind of start to get them to grasp maybe something you're talking about. I personally am a visual learner. I know that many can discuss things or talk through things, but this kind of helps give at least a starting point to what we're going to be discussing. So Robin, anything coming in?
Yes, so we have someone on there, someone said on the right, the larger tree seems to be reaching out to the smaller one and pulling it up. The tree on the left, the reflection, and back to the tree on the top on the left. Left one is peaceful but solo, right one seems full grown and mature.
Nice. I think that's really cool, by the way. You know, the way you're talking about that bigger tree on the right, almost dancing with the tree on the left and dipping as a part of that maneuver. Kind of the other side. Sorry, this is me if you don't know. This is why we couldn't put expert by my name on this presentation. But kind of the way that the tree on the left has kind of had to adapt or evolve or, you know, consider when they were younger, kind of the process of how maybe that was in the shade and how it had to find a way to want to survive, grow, and mature, and how that had to adapt. Similar on the left, kind of considering how, besides the reflection, which is a fantastic, I didn't even notice that until earlier today when we were discussing this more, but kind of how does that possibly even find a way to grow within that sort of setting? Similar type of things.
Yes, we have someone else that said the image on the left is beautiful depiction of growth in a location that may not seem normal.
And that's awesome. I think, you know, when we talk about us as parents and you get this little bundle of joy and, you know, like to me, being a mom was always something scary that it was kind of like, could I or could I not do that? And then going, well, the really easy thing is if maybe they're exactly like me, which is terrifying to think. But the scary thing is, what if they're nothing like me and I don't know how to help them be, you know, develop into the full grown adult that I hope them to be. And like these images kind of put me to rest at times as a mom. And I'm looking at it and going, he and her will figure their way. And whether it's someone who's older or bigger, or maybe casting a tad of a shadow over my kid will still learn to grow at times. And then maybe, like you said, on the left side, I think that's it's a beautiful way to say that, you know, beautiful things can grow in the most, you know, odd of places at times and unpredictable. So great. Thank you guys. We appreciate you interacting.
Kind of as Candice is going to probably present now kind of some of the results, but as she's going through that, kind of glance between the left and the right sides about what is a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, and then we'll kind of discuss it a little bit kind of throughout.
So looking at your guys' results, based off of you're just agreeing with one statement over the other, and sometimes that can be a difficult task. But overall, it seems like we do have a really good mix of people with more of a growth mindset when it comes to those three questions. And we did kind of aim it at intelligence, sports, and trying hard, those areas that when you look at the right side versus the left side of fixed versus growth, kind of how do those things get defined when we're talking about that type of mindset. A couple answers towards the fixed, which I think is awesome, because one of the areas that I think as we reflect on ourselves as parents, there's no way you land in the same bucket probably on every single area. I know for myself, there are things that I have to improve on as a fixed mindset. I'm too stuck on this is what it is and nothing can change or improve. And there's areas that I am nailing the whole growth mindset and knocking it out of the park. So right now it looks like we are trending towards growth mindset, which I think Jackie and Dr. Robin, that's a good thing, that we've got a lot of great people on this call that are already thinking that way. But yeah, that's...
You know, one thing I was thinking about whenever, and I've done these in the past, you know, I know the right answer to say. I know, you know, the question and what it means to be growth. And I want to be there. Like, I want to answer that. But there's so often that I have to admit that I'm really coming out that fixed mindset and really learning. I think it's recognizing that we do it. We are sometimes, and especially given kind of we're really stressed or tired or overworked and we're kind of struggling, I think we quickly will fall into that fixed mindset, and how these two can be so fluid. And I think with parenting, we see that a lot. Wouldn't you agree, Jackie, when all the parents that we've worked with will see that movement between the two of these?
Yes, and I think it's especially now when a lot of the kids, at least near where I live, are in e-learning. They're not back to school. And so one of the things I've had to talk to a lot of kids and parents is that expectations may have to shift. And so ways we may have reacted to things in the past may be different now. I was talking to a dad today, and he found out that his daughter, who's in high school, has not been doing the e-learning. So 2 weeks had gone by and she's missed a ton of assignments. He got really mad, and he really kind of went off and yelled at her, "Why aren't you doing your homework? This is terrible. This is awful. You need to do it, and you're going to have a consequence." And think about for a second which mindset that example reflects. And I agree with what Robin has said, is that so often, you know, we want to be in the growth mindset, but the way we react to our kids often reflects that fixed mindset of, you know, you didn't do what you were supposed to, thus I'm pissed, versus kind of what happened and what's going on for you, that, you know, why are you struggling to get this done? And so it's sometimes it is about looking at what our reactions reflect. Do our reactions come out of that fixed versus growth mindset?
Yeah, you know, and I look at avoiding challenges, and I think for parents, often it's really hard when they see their child being challenged or seeing their child really struggle. And I know, Candice and Paul, you probably would say this not only academically, but, you know, out on the soccer fields, out on the basketball courts, when you're for an individual's in performance and having that real challenge. I think as a parent, it's really hard to watch that happen. You know, I will be the first probably to defend those parents that think that their children are very gifted, because often I think they do see something. And I think, you know, their perception is what they see. But I think so often we're quickly to get frustrated at those parents. But think about if you see someone with some real potential and you really believe that they can achieve something, you're going to give them every opportunity that you can. And I think it may be difficult for you to see when they're struggling.
Yeah, no,
What's your thoughts, Candice and Paul?
Yeah, no, I think you guys are hitting so many valid points and so many things that we're looking forward to kind of continuing that discussion through the rest of this presentation. So Obviously, I think we all see common trends, and this uncertain time, when Paul and I have gone through it as, coaches, as professionals, as parents, the best thing we can do is kind of reflect on the experiences where there is other uncertain times. And so, we've talked about, in sports a lot, there's tryouts at certain ages, and a tryout is uncertain times. As a parent, you're putting your kid into a performance environment and hoping for a really good result, but it's going to be a time frame that you're probably not going to know the answer to that. What team is my kid on? And that's uncertainty, and that can cause, nervousness, that can cause anxiety, that can cause a parent to overreact. And, the kid walks out of too many tryouts we've seen, and a parent is just going off the rails on a kid after a tryout, and they don't even know the answer to the team that the kid's going to make. When we talk about school and academics, right now you take a test, you might not know the answer or the grade of that test. I think about papers I wrote, you just don't know. And so as parents, when we're talking about how we can influence our kids, that uncertain time that we're in right now, when we don't know when all of this is going to be over, that growth mindset that, we don't know yet, we eventually will know, but we keep growing. We don't stop. We don't freeze. Because that's the thing that we always tell kids is, even if the team you make at the end isn't the team you ultimately, want to be on next year, you got a whole nother year that you can show us up, and we want you to. We want you to come back bigger and better, because you showed us in the uncertain times you were still growing and you were still dedicated to the larger picture. So with the larger picture, I'm gonna.
Oh yeah, thanks. No, that's good. Definitely spot on. I mean, and as you guys are all alluding to, like, we're starting to get into then the next steps of kind of that. How the kids maybe are processing, but maybe also how the adults are processing things and influencing then that environment for the kid. We talk a lot kind of in our world of there's so many things out of our control, and that's where sports or school are kind of a smaller microcosm of real life. You get to train and practice successes, failures, maybe more rapidly with maybe less of an impact in, all of a sudden now you lose a job. No, it's a bad grade. How do we fix it? So there's lots of learning opportunities, but we talk a lot about controlling the controllables. And a lot of times that spiral comes from, it's uncertain, but also because of that, we feel like we're losing control as adults. And we'll kind of bounce back and forth between ways to maybe help manage some of that, some tips to go, but kind of starting with that awareness from our adult selves with how we maybe handle situations. A lot of that ties in with kind of this rational perspective that we're going to kind of get into a little bit. And we can kind of go back and forth, but from that, kind of taking a big picture, too often we look through the world through the eyes of our child. So if they're in pain, we're in pain. They're elated, we're elated. And we're riding the roller coaster with them. But can we start to maybe pull out a little bit and kind of get a big picture view of this might be a downtime, this might be a happy time. How are we still moving forward with it and not getting stuck on it or grab to it so tightly that we're not able to maybe take the next steps? So knowing your child and how they might handle that is one, but also yourself as an adult and how you might recognize it or process it yourself. Anything?
Yeah, no, I think, there's this, we had the core of adult influence. And the reason we talk about that is because our role as coaches, we know, is when the game begins and the referee blows the whistle, we can't go on the field and move the child to the spot they're supposed to be. That's not a part of the game. The child has to play the game and make decisions, and some of those will be better, some are not so good. We don't ever say wrong or right when we coach personally, because we don't believe that in the game where there's multiple choices, you can never make a wrong or right. There's better and maybe less good, to make it in a kid word, but we have an influence, and that's what we believe as coaches, and that's how we parent personally. And I think what Paul's talking about, that non-emotional response. So one of the things that we do a lot is we have this 24-hour rule, and the 24-hour rule works this way. If there is something negative that occurs, so you don't play this weekend, you get a bad grade, as a parent, helping to model this and have your kid do the same is for 24 hours, you're really not going to acknowledge or have an emotional reaction outwardly. You could sit and cry, you could have some time alone to reflect, but we're not going to go make active steps of reaching out to a coach or a teacher. We're not going to jump on the heightened emotion of feeling either a failure or a defeat or something uncomfortable. So we're going to take 24 hours to let those emotions kind of come down. On the flip side, if something great happens, we are celebrating it for a day, give or take a little bit. But we think there's a really good thing about celebrating it for a short period of time, making your kid feel special, making your player, whoever, feel really excited about what's happened. But then you refocus and you get the player, child, whatever, on the next path of what's the next step and the next goal that they have. We're a big proponent, we've been in, how many great youth tournaments with our little medals, and all the parents are excited and they're all talking about the next tournament we're going to win. And as coaches, we have to kind of say, great, celebrate it overnight. Let's see you on Monday's practice. And remember that we have work to do before the next game. That pertains to school. You get a good grade. It's not typically the end of the semester or maybe the end of your degree. You still have more to do. So that 24-hour rule, celebrate for 24 hours on the good things and then move on with your next goal and set a plan. Defeats, failures, take 24 hours to let those emotions come down before you start creating that action plan going forward.
Candice and Paul, we have someone that's just commented, and I think, first of all, I said thank you to them for sharing. It says, I resonate with the idea of non-emotional response. It is in my nature to respond big in all I do. It's how I have shown up for everything in my life. I definitely need to work on this. And I think, really to put that out there and to be honest, I think that's huge. And, I always say if there's a big response, it's probably because there's something big going on. And acknowledge that emotional reaction. It's there for a reason, but then make that decision on how you're going to respond to it. And Jackie, I know you're about to come in, and I was going to bring it to you because I think you have a lot to say on this.
Well, I think sometimes we as parents, and I don't know if anyone on here can relate, but sometimes we parent out of worry. And I think we worry our kids are going to get left behind and we want them to do really well. So we parent, or maybe we see them struggling and we respond big because we're worried and we think. So one thing Robin and I talk a lot about is really just ask yourself kind of where you are in that rational versus emotional place. And if you find that you're really emotional, take a step back and ask yourself what you're responding to, because sometimes you may find that you're responding to your own worry. I find when my kids were playing sports, I found that parents can be super competitive, and just spending a lot of time with certain parents would make me anxious and feel like my kids were lagging behind, which made me react. So I think sometimes just being aware of kind of what's the goal of your response. Is it because you're worried or nervous, or is it because you really want, you're trying to teach your child something in the moment? And sometimes that helped me to weed the two out. And I would say probably 80% of the time I had to halt my reactions because they were more out of anxiety or worry.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we suggest to the parent, when the kid gets in the car or the first time you see them, whether the result, so let's say it's a tryout, we try to keep parents away from tryouts just to help the pressure and the anxiety for kids, but, go, how did tryouts go? And take their lead on the emotional response. So if they're really emotional, you see them choking up as they're walking into the car, they're getting into the car, then you take the lead to go, okay, let's just take a breath. I'm sure we can, think about things that we can do, and it's one tryout, it's one moment or whatever. If your kid gets in there like, oh my God, I was the best player out there, you can go, awesome, that's so good, great, congrats. I'm sure there was a lot of good players too. So you kind of bring that down, you can match it and take their lead on their experience. And if it's just it was fine, then you kind of got to take that lead and go, okay, cool.
Something that I kind of like to do, I mean, again, we live this a lot and we see it quite a bit. You're going to have those highs and lows, but can you get the player, the child, to start talking about the reasons and kind of the details a bit more about why was it so good? Why was it why in your mind do you think it wasn't as good as you wanted it to be? So that they are already starting to consider maybe the little steps, the process, and focus more on the reasons and things they can control again, as opposed to just that success or that failure and then that emotional response again. So trying to help guide that. Go ahead.
We have a question. I get not riding the roller coaster with the kid, but doesn't not having an emotional response teach them to ignore their emotions? It's when those emotions are going on is when the teaching moments can occur, correct?
Yeah, we're not disagreeing that you're, if your kid's celebrating, you're just standing there stoic and just staring at them. The idea in really that 24-hour rule is you can match in a parent big picture rational way. So if your kid won the tournament and in the 24 hours, you're like, awesome, hey, you want to pick out dinner for the night, big winner, but it's not maybe like, you know what this means? You got a scholarship, it's coming. Like the college coaches are gonna be there. Like we need to then rationalize how we then respond, because as adults, we understand the success and the failures that come with this. There's always something that's on the horizon that we need to be preparing for. And as adults, we have that big picture. And at the end of the day, what are we all trying to do with our kids is really produce adults that can contribute to society, that have independence, that have healthy relationships with people. And so I don't disagree that it's not the full roller coaster in doing it, but I also think, yeah, teaching them those emotions are huge. I mean, one of the things we say constantly is when you win, you lose, or when you win, you learn, but you learn so much more from losing, because the kid that is so emotionally distraught from a loss, as a parent, you can step in and you can add some perspective, because does the one loss equal out to the sport being something they don't enjoy? Or is the note they miss in the music concert, is it really the end of the world? Or will they have that chance to do it again and prove everybody they can do it? So yeah, I completely agree. There's a lot of parenting time and not writing that emotion, but it's also because we have the big picture in mind. We know that there's something else they're either going to be able to reprove themselves in to kind of, compete with that failure, or there's going to be something that's going to come along the way that's going to be a super challenge that maybe they haven't seen before. So
we're going to get into some of those kind of tips in a little bit of going, definitely celebrate, be excited. You could even be sad, but you're probably going to be having another game. You're going to have another test. So at some point in the curve, it's going to be starting to think forward again. So live in the moment and celebrate. I often talk to 12s, 13s, 14-year-olds about passion versus emotion. And the passion being a bit more driven, directional. There's going to be highs and lows, but you also have that ability to kind of directionalize it, as opposed to letting the emotion sometimes take that control out of it. And again, they're needed and it's fantastic, but at the same time, kind of thinking about enjoy it in a balanced state, not overly focused on the downs or the dips. Good?
good.
The other thing I was going to say is from the college side, we would talk a lot about, to the incoming freshmen and incoming parents, about judging the player or the kid situation over the bigger picture, not when they're pissed off they didn't play or when they fail the test, because of course they're going to need to vent, frustrate. The biggest positive and curse are these cell phones that kind of give that instant gratification of, I suck today. And you're the first call, which is great, but then how do we help them maybe manage through that? And we're kind of talking about that big picture again. How are we helping 9-year-olds and then 15-year-olds to become those adults, and kind of the aim of what we're talking through here with that adult influence. Good? Yeah. Anything more about modeling or facilitating? Or are we good to kind of move on?
I think we're good.
Yes. Keep the questions coming as well, by the way. Definitely good to help make sure it's relevant for you guys.
Absolutely. So in the next idea for us, for the core of influence that we can have as adults, and we say adults because in our world we can be talking to parents or we can be talking to coaches, is solution oriented, process oriented. And this is huge. And one of the things that, when you model or facilitate the big picture, a lot of times as parents, we give direction, right? Go clean your room. Go do this, go do that. How often can we rephrase things into a question in a circumstance, say there's a low, and going, okay, so it really feels crappy right now. And I get it, you're validated for feeling this way. Okay, so now what could you do in order to improve your situation? And as adults and as coaches, and when we coach, adults, we spit out answers. We spit it out. We can't help ourselves. And if we can take time to seriously shut up and listen, these kids are going to come up with some options. And so one of the things we would challenge you guys to do, and we have to catch ourselves, is one, find ways to ask more guided questions, guided discovery questions, to give the kids the chance to create a solution. But the part is that they may look at you, and especially if you're not in the habit of asking your kids questions about what they could do to solve something, I can guarantee you your kid's going to look at you like you got 3 heads. All right. As coaches, we see that a lot when they're in a mindset or a way that all they've been done is kind of joysticked around and been told what to do. When they're allowed to have that free will and that decision making, they kind of look at you like, huh? So shut up, listen, give them time, give them space, tell them they can go to their room and create a list of solutions. And that's kind of the next little tidbit that, you know, we do a lot is going, okay, you could have 15 million ways to solve this. I want you to go think of 3 ways to solve this problem you have. So maybe it's how you failed a test, or I, didn't make the team, or I had a bad game. Okay, go list 3 things you could do to help improve this. And then I want you to rank them. And guess what we're gonna do? We're gonna try it out. And you're gonna give that kid that ownership. You as a parent may look at the list of 3 things and go, no way, Jose, none of them are gonna work. But our recommendation is let that play out. In sports in particular, from our experience, this is a huge component. And we see parents constantly on the sideline, boot it, dribble, shoot. And it's like, stop. Like, because if as a kid, when the game is going around them, they're trying to process like millions of little decisions. And when mom or dad is going to influence me with a joystick, and it's mom and dad, how do I not listen to mom and dad? We're really taking that chance away for them to go, I could, in soccer terms, I could dribble, I could pass, I could shoot the ball. Well, that's 3 basic decisions, and I got somebody already telling me it. I don't get a chance to even put that in order and see if anything will succeed or fail. And so we're really big on shut up and listen, let them create some decision making, and let them rank and fail, honestly, because that accountability and that responsibility really shines through when we talk that way with our kids and allow it. And I will share one personal story just because it's pretty fresh in our minds. So our 10-year-old's in karate. He just started a little bit ago. He has his yellow belt now. Yeah, yellow belt. And a lot of the karate teaching, there's a lot of discipline. And so we were really excited about that because that was an area we felt like he could really benefit. So he has homework. And part of the homework was creating really good habits. And he could make the decision on the habit and had to track not having to be prompted to complete it. So he has this piece of paper and he fills it all out and brings it to us. And I go, okay, I can get on board with that. Awesome. So he's going to bed that night. The next day he's going to start the tracking. And the sheet is in the middle of the floor. And I'm going, buddy, what? Your homework's in the floor. He goes, no, Mom. When I wake up, I'll step on it and I'll remember that's what I need to do. And I'm, as a mother, going, there's just another thing on the floor. And why do we have to put the paper on the floor? What if we rip? But guess what? I shut up, I listened, and I gave it a shot. And for our kid who, this is a good thing he needs to work on, darn, that kid remembered every morning to brush his teeth, get himself dressed, and make his bed, and check it off on his sheet. And when he turned his homework assignment in, he felt so excited and accountable. And he was like, I did it. And you didn't have to tell me how to solve it. I mean, he didn't use those words, but I didn't. And, no, I hope as an adult, he's not putting paper all over the floor in order to remember, get groceries, pay your bills and all that. Maybe it's a nice Post-it note somewhere, or a reminder in his phone, but he had his needs he knew of, and he solved it with no impact from mom and dad, though that would have never been the way I solved it. So that's kind of one thing. I don't know if anybody else has similar stories to, how do you let kids have that creative solution time and facilitate that a little bit.
I have put that in the chat, asking people to share any ones that they have had, so we can move forward, and then I can let you know if anyone puts anything in.
Absolutely. So the last thing when we talk about solution oriented, and this is simply a tool, and there's many tools that kind of are similar to that, and that's the smarter goal setting. That's also called SMART goals. It's called Way Smart. There's a lot of variances to that. And so essentially, it's a way to help kids create that goal, whether it's big or short term, and create it in a way that is a one sentence mindset that maybe they put it on a Post-it note, or they put in their phone, or they put up in their locker, whatever it is. But too many times, we do this exercise with adults and they can't they can't really get very specific, or they miss how they're going to measure their goal setting, how they're going to make sure it's attainable, or really how they're going to evaluate things. And so as adults, this is actually quite a difficult task to do. Though, if we can get kids looking at creating goals in a very specific way that they then can create and feel that success, because again, they're creating it, they're having the accountability and the responsibility to it, you're going to find that their ability to look forward and say, I can accomplish something, and then check it off and go, I'm ready to accomplish the next thing, I think you're going to find so much better. So this is some of the things, a smarter goal or smart goal or way smarter, those types of things you can Google and find really good exercises to try with your children or try with your players, to really get them in that mindset that this is not about today's practice or tomorrow's game. It's a part of the process, and what's the real end goal. And for some kids, it might be on a national team, or it might just be to make your high school team, or it just might be to play on the weekend. And if that's their goal, to play on the weekend because they want to earn the coach's, nod to play, awesome. So help them set a SMART goal for the weekend, or if it's the big one.
Yeah, so I was dropping my daughter off today for 2nd grade, and out of the blue, she goes, oh, today we're going to work on pause. And I'm like, pause? What's pause? And she's going, well, it's PAWS. So there's a problem. Then there's going to be an approach to that problem, and then I'm going to do the work based on that problem, and then I'm going to come up to a solution. So in school systems, like, that's a more simplistic way. It's really just giving that kid a structure and a process to kind of think through situations to maybe come up with realistic solutions. So it could be as intense as these smarter goals, or as simplified as here's some steps. I think the two, kind of why I think this slide was in, if you look at the bottom, bringing back that there is the moment to recognize that growth. There is the moment to even possibly reward that growth in some way, and or revisit it. And that's kind of where that smarter comes in, to kind of kick it back in, to kind of keep it ongoing with evaluation, that process.
And how we emotionally respond to that as parents.
We do have someone that shared, and I really like this, and I think it's so true. I try to let my kids figure out how to solve a problem they are having between them, i.e. not stepping in when they are fighting. When I do step in, they usually become resentful of the outcome. When they solve it themselves, usually they're both satisfied. And I think that's so true. I love this one.
Yeah, and that's, we see that with our own kids. There are times that we're in the other room, like on that debate. Do we step in? Do we not step in? Credit to our daughter, she's 3 years younger, but she's a spitfire. And so our son better watch out in the next few years, because she's going to come barreling in. But, we see that. And I'm going to go back to Jackie made a really good point earlier that, I wanted to reflect on about other parents around and that influence that they can have. We've seen so many times where you have really a growth mindset child or parent. We have parent meetings, we have player meetings, and you see all this like, oh yeah, they get this. Like they're in this for the long-term development, but they'll be on a team where they have those kind of, corrosive parents. There's a lot of fixed mindset among the other group, and you see that shift. And, in our belief that the game is teaching, not just the game, it's teaching life skills. It just as teachers are, again, we learned today exactly with our daughter with the pause analogy, that we know that what we're doing is for a long-term benefit. And, we're sitting at practice that week, and, there's a group of 15-year-old boys just fighting the growth, just fighting that opportunity to say, no, go make a decision. And I'm not going to yell, go make a decision and screw up. And let's talk about what happened, or go have an awesome moment. And let's talk about how great it was and why it was great, and being specific. When we look at our 3-year-old son at that time, who's crawling up the slide, and he keeps slipping, falling down. He climbs up the slide, he slips and falls down. You know what the 3-year-old did? On his own, went over, took his socks off, and go, I'm going to grip a lot better walking up the stairs or walking up the slide. And, sure, the 3-year-old's going to bust his head open, and he eventually did. But the long story short is he had a problem and he solved it. And he was 3 because he was given time and given a chance to fail and given some thought to going, what could work. And my kid's great. He's not a genius, but he's a good kid. And that's just kind of how we look at it and go, if a 3-year-old can have time to create a solution, our 15-year-olds, when they're given the time and the chance to not have that pressure from mom and dad walking in and saying, well, what did coach say? What did coach play you? Why is coach not playing that person there? That really can actually create a really fixed mindset for that player, that it doesn't matter what's going to happen. It's the coach's fault, or it's his fault or her fault that we're not going anywhere or getting better as a team. And it really makes it difficult for those kids that we see our growth mindset, by either inclination or teaching.
That goes back to that big picture, but also child-centered. It's not our role as parents, coaches, et cetera, to create a divide or a mini enemy as a part of the discussion. And that's part of that. It's easy to emotionally get involved and say, yeah, forget that kid, or the coach is dumb. Be cognizant of the words and phrases that we use, and then maybe how to help them. Because again, if it's about the kid, do we want our 9-year-old to become the 14-year-old that tells the coach to stick it, or the teacher that they don't know what they're talking about, etc. We're not saying they're not standing up for themselves, and we're not saying that. We're saying, how do we help find a way to maybe solve it in a more productive way, kind of moving forward. Sorry, we good? Next steps?
Yeah, so the last one, and I've been listening to Jackie and Dr. Robin's previous ones, because again, we're parents, and so we want to be better. And get comfortable being uncomfortable is probably, with not just the uncertain times we're living in right now, it's really pertaining pretty much to every day as a parent, because I don't know about you guys, but every day brings something that I didn't see coming as a parent, and going, okay, how am I going to deal with this? And, for a child, some of that growth that occurs is when people are giving them information and giving them specific feedback about something they did. And, when we're talking about how kids process when that occurs, it varying on their age, it can be a really hard thing to hear someone give you something. And I work with I set up a women's group to support females in the game, both professionally and then adding a player aspect as well. And I see this with females a lot when I'm working with them, is that they can't even accept positive feedback. You played a great game, and they're like, I did this, this, and this, and this wrong. And you're like, no, you have to acknowledge what you did well. I did an exercise a couple months ago with a 16-year-old girls team, and they had to put 3 things they want to get better on, write down on a paper. And they could list those 3 things like that. I go, okay, list 3 things that you're really good at and contribute to the team. I can tell you in the same amount of time, they didn't get the 3 things done that they were good at, but they could nail the 3 things they needed to get better at. That's not a bad thing, but if we're talking about kids being able to receive feedback, we need to make sure they're looking and processing both the positives of feedback, and then sometimes those less, fuzzy, less warm ways that they're going to provide or be provided that feedback. And, one of the areas of things that we did at the club level in youth for a very long time is players were required to shake the hand of the coach and thank them at every end of the practice. So from our 5-year-olds all the way up to our 19-year-olds, they would go to the coach at the end of the practice, and there'd be a line saying, thank you. Maybe not in this stage should you be shaking hands. Maybe it's just a little elbow or air high five. But what was so amazing about this, not only is it the adult skill of making eye contact, of talking to an adult, of having a firm handshake and thanking them, which is a great skill, but there are practices where a kid was not happy with something I said to them, or they felt maybe defeated, or they were mad at a teammate, and they still had to come up and say thank you and look me in the eye and say something. And it was, for some, it was like the worst thing you could ask them to do at the end of practice, because they either felt defeated, or they felt like they didn't do well, or they felt like I was mad, or whatever. And at that point in time, we can have a firm handshake, say thank you for playing, a great job today, and hey, let's talk about practice, and we can reflect. So as parents, what types of habits can we put in on a regular basis so that our kids are working on receiving feedback and then processing feedback? And so when I think about feedback, there's really 3 things that happen when you get feedback. So I get feedback, and I can choose that I am going to do something about it. Go, you know what, Jackie, that's awesome. You know what I think I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna buy my journal, I'm gonna start journaling down how I felt about the game this weekend. Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna get feedback, and I'm gonna say, thanks, no thanks, appreciate it. And you can do that. A kid should give the ownership that they can say, I got feedback, it didn't really resonate, or I don't think it impacts me. And I think that's a good adult skill to say, I got something, I listened, I processed it, and I decided that it's not for me. That's fine. The third way to get feedback and process it is that you say, I need more information about that feedback, or I have questions about that feedback. So now I need to return to the person that gave that to me, and I got to work on kind of asking questions about it. In our world, the most common is, hey, you're not playing this position this weekend, or you're not going to be on this team. And the kid comes back and says, okay, I would like to know what I need to improve on and how I can do that. Great. Now we're having a discussion that's going to be process oriented. We're going to put the ball in their court on things that they think are attainable to do, realistic to their time. And we're going to start putting time frames on it. And for them, they're going to get that feedback, and they're now processing it and creating that solution. And so we think that's, creating a routine with your kids that when they get feedback, what are they going to choose to do with that feedback? And that's a really big part that you have to go back to shut up and listen and let them have that time to process that feedback.
So we have a question, and I think it's a good time to put in. So my son's inner voice speaks louder than any positive feedback we give him. For example, in hockey last Friday, we praised his skills, first time on ice ever, and at the end of practice, he bawled and said, "I'm the worst, I'm horrible." I'm looking for guidance on how to navigate these conversations, as this is showing up in sports and academics.
I'm guessing puberty is involved in some way, and I'm not trying to say that lightly. But things that we kind of deal with when we...
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm the one that asked the question. My name's Jessie. I did want to mention he's actually only 5 years old.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. That helps.
And I feel like that's important, because I don't think I'm demonstrating or that he's getting that from his father by any means. So we don't know where it could be mimicked from or seen, but it's definitely language that I don't hear in a 5-year-old often.
Yeah. So can I ask this? What's the coach like at practice? The instructors?
So as I mentioned, this language is showing up everywhere. It's not just at practice. I mean, this was his first week in hockey, and the coaches were praising him. In fact, he took a break off the ice, and she had whispered to us, like, is this his first time on the ice? He's amazing. And we were like, yeah. We were also shocked, to hear that, he said these things when we were all praising him.
Yeah.
And, and he fell several times. The whole practice was actually, they were purposefully falling to learn how to get up on the ice.
Awesome. So, I would first thing I would do is he's 5. And so, going with what you did where you shared that praise, and, if you didn't do it next time, tell them what the coach told, the player, because that's always something, either mom and dad are going to say the same thing as the coach, and hopefully the kid is listening to one or the other. So if not, make sure you're reiterating if you get those positive feedbacks, because sometimes as coaches, we maybe miss that direct moment with that kid to give them that information. So I think that would be one thing that we always say. If you're getting feedback from the coach, make sure you're sharing that with your kid. The other thing is, I think with them being the age they are, they're able to kind of focus with verbal, possibly more than written, on things that they did well. And I would really, really reiterate that, like, the first thing they have to do when they come off the ice or when they come home from school is acknowledge a win of the day. Like, don't even let the negative conversation start. Okay, we got to have a win. And one of the podcasts I listened to, and part of it is a Soccer Connection, it's called Laughter Permitted. And every time in the podcast, what they do is around their kitchen table, everybody has to share a win, a success, I think they said, and then a challenge for the new day, and then a shout out to somebody else. And so the win is something that they feel like they accomplished, that, grand or small, they have to acknowledge it. And that's always the first part of it. And her kids are a little bit older in the podcast, but I think that could be a great thing, that you even go, hold on, whoa, buddy. You have to tell me one good thing you did. You have, that's the first thing. That's the rule, buddy. You got to give me the one first good thing. And that way you're getting them in that practice of self-talk and self-reflection, that the hope is that when they're coming off the ice or they're coming home from home, they might be able to tell you and get in that routine and look at you and go, all right, mom, so I met a new friend today and we played at the park. Awesome. But then things, broke apart, and then you're going to be able to kind of process that second piece. But I think giving that rule and that expectation and setting a routine that the win must be the first part that comes off the field or off that rink or at home is something that we found to be successful. And I know Jackie and Dr. Robin, you might have some other suggestions through your guys' experience.
I think for me, and this may not apply for you, Jesse, but I know for me, I just had to be careful of how I'd react, because like when my kids are adults now, but when the one was younger, that would make me feel bad. And then I would like do a lot of things to like reassure her and make her feel better. And then there were times where I think she reacted that way to get me to react a certain way, because sometimes it led to lunch or like doing something really nice for her because I wanted to build her up. I think sometimes when we worry about our kids' confidence, we can over compliment too. And I think we turn into a lot of excessive praise. And again, this may not be for you, but this was more for me. So I just had to be careful of how I was reacting, because sometimes I was reinforcing her reaction by my overreaction. And so sometimes I had to not react, if that makes sense.
It seems like such a fine line to, you know, find that balance, because I can see how that he would want to constantly feel that praise. I mean, even with e-learning, I have to sit with him for some of the exercises, you know, being a kindergartner, and he's on the screen with his teacher and he's looking at me for reassurance. Or if he's not on the screen with his teacher and I'm helping him through an activity, before he can even complete it in his mind, he's already looking up for that reassurance. So I feel like I'm really just riding this thin line of like wanting to praise, but also not too much.
And I would say lay out those expectations. So before e-learning starts that morning or before the next hockey practice, you're going to go, okay, hey, here's one thing. And you participated in it as well. And this is that vulnerability as a parent that, you know, is so important, is go, okay, buddy, here's what's going to happen. Either at this point in time, we're each going to say something we did really well today. And you're going to model that self-positive talk. And you're going to challenge. And at 5, they usually can find something, and it might be as small as, you know what, I can't even think of a great example right now off the top of my head, but like the smallest minutia detail that he can start to acknowledge at the beginning might be the thing that you go, awesome. Okay, so how did everything else go? And see if the win at the beginning can maybe change that tone slowly and surely. And again, you're letting them control that emotion. And once they spiral, it's hard. And I'm not, crediting that that's not a hard moment to manage. And as Jackie said, again, I've been in the anxiety roller coaster of wanting to praise them and make them feel great. But at the same time, if you can say the expectation early, I think you might find that he'll get in a routine of coming out, and he may look at you like, I got to name the win. Yeah, name the win. That's what we do, buddy. And that's what I'm going to do. That's what you're going to do. And that's how we're going to kind of take these things, and just might be something to try.
Something that I was thinking about kind of through this is starting to recognize the triggers of those situations. And I don't want to get too far into that. That's probably more for Dr. Robin and Jackie to get into. But I would also say that we're maybe not focusing on only practicing these sorts of things in that moment, but are there other little moments you can kind of even create, even for a 5-year-old, hey, let's do this picture. What types of things have them start to maybe focus internally about, hey, think about what color you really want to use and where you want to put it, and try to get them to maybe start reframing things in their mind, and kind of talking through some of that stuff with them. So then they're practicing a little bit more, multiple times a day, multiple times a week. So then those other situations, these other tips can kind of also then be brought back into play, and there's some practice with it. Sorry, anything from you, Dr. Robin or Jackie, on those things?
No, I think
part of it, I like how you guys said, part of it is just teaching kids that they're not supposed to be good at everything. And really kind of practicing. I like how you said, Candice, about what's something, I did well, and even something I totally screwed up today. That I think the biggest thing that we try to work on with the kids, at least that I work with, is, realistic expectations. And you're not going to be good at everything. And let's kind of start to like set those expectations. Maybe we're just looking for improvement if that's what you care about. But I see this with a lot of high school kids. And I had one in my office tonight who's taking like 5 AP classes and burning herself out. And her expectation is she needs to be perfect at every level. And she's like practicing the ACT. And, we just talked about where that expectation came from. And she constantly feels like a failure because her expectation is perfection. And that's not practical. So we really just spent some time on expectations and recognizing that you're going to have strengths and weaknesses, and that's reality, and that's how do you embrace them both. So I think that's important for all of our kids, just to understand that they're not supposed to do well in all areas.
Yeah, and I think that learning circle that we kind of have on the slideshow is one of those ways that we talk to kids about exactly what you're saying, Jackie. You're not going to be great at everything. You're not going to be perfect at everything, but you're going to have an experience. And when you have that experience, as a parent, you can help to guide and facilitate what the reflection is going to look like next. So when I say guide and facilitate, you don't give the reflection. They give the reflection of the activity or the experience that they've had. And again, that's a shut up and listen moment. That then should then create some sort of development plan. And the big thing we talk about with routines and when we talk about athletes is that they typically are going to create a pre and post activity routine that has a balance of preparation and a balance of reflection. And, you know, it can be as simple as with our kids, when they started to go to practice, they got to pick the music that we listened to. And it was kind of that, what's the pump up music? And that was, we're going to practice, you're ready to focus, you're ready to play in the activity, but let's get you hyped up and excited to go to this activity. So that's something we did with the young kids so that they were feeling that ownership of they got their routine to prepare for practice. Reflection is so individual and so personal. So when they're in that stage and they're coming out to create a development plan of what they're going to do to go apply this idea or this process or this, you know, creative solution they have, that's going to look different for every kid. And so, you know, one of the things that I remember always being told is, Candice, go journal, go journal, go journal. This guy will journal out the wazoo. It's not my thing. It's never been my thing. He writes lovely cards to me that are very deep and emotional and all these things. And I'm over there like, happy birthday, love Candice. It's not my jam. And it's not how I reflect on my relationships and all that. Sorry. So what was it for me? I had a routine in terms of how I put on my socks and my shin guards and my cleats. I had a routine to the music I listened to. I had a routine to what happened afterwards after the game and who I would talk to and who I wouldn't talk to and when I would talk to people. So as parents, what I would say is, again, we're only influencing and we're guiding. We're not necessarily giving them all of the answers. So when you're talking to your kid about, okay, how do you want to be ready for the test in the morning? Okay, well, what do you think you might want to eat? Like, what do you think like gets you ready? And giving them that ownership to say, here's what I would like to eat. Now, within reason, I please don't, you know, take that to the extreme. We also deal with kids that, you know, after practice or after a game, we tell the parent, if the kid says, hey, I don't want to talk about it, I want to be able to think about it, you have to respect that space. So allowing the kids to create their own routines and their own reflection processes and their own preparation processes, when they get to that left-hand side of the circle and they go to apply it, they're then going to go back to the top and they're going to have an experience that they're going to hopefully go back and reflect on because they've been allowed to complete that circle and have that ownership and accountability. We're influencing and we're guiding from the outside, maybe giving suggestions and giving thoughts, giving a little bit of sense of a timeline for them, but they've got to own that learning cycle and they've got to be able to say that I've taken a solution and I've put it into it and now I've had another experience and I need to reflect on it. So that's kind of really the
simple reason or simple example I would say, and I know we're coming up at the top of the hour, would be our two kids. So our 7-year-old daughter will come home. They both have homework, or our daughter wants to come home, get it done, and move on and have the rest of the night. Our son needs 30 minutes to deflate, watch TV, eat a snack, and then he's more focused to be able to then handle that next step of the night. Yeah. So taking that into consideration. Kind of moving on, I'm bringing the tree back. It's a friendly little guy. Hopefully we were able to help give you some tips, some insights. We talked about the influence, just kind of making sure you guys have those three areas that we see as kind of the main pieces and the way they kind of interact. Everything we talked about, is it a part of all three things? So kind of that rational perspective and kind of talking about the big picture, the emotional or non-emotional response, modeling the behavior, the solution, trying to be creative, the smarter goals, and maybe kind of giving that responsibility and accountability, and kind of within that modeling, not to go backwards, but kind of showing that it's okay not to be perfect and that we're all working on it. We show that we mess up, our kid feels it's okay. But then we figure out, hey, this is also how we're working on it. And then kind of that last little bit about the feeling comfortable or comfortable being uncomfortable, and kind of processing those reflection pieces, the feedback pieces, etc. So that's the end of our slide. If you guys want to wrap up or add anything.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you both. I thought that was excellent. Hopefully everyone got something out of it. And please join us next Wednesday. We will be hosted by Dr. Shelley Fisher. And we are excited to see you guys there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
visiting.
you, everyone.
That was really great.
If you haven't registered for next week, you will need to go back to the brown paper tickets, which is 6-week parenting group.brownpapertickets.com, and register for next week. It'll be a great one. If you have any questions, certainly let us know. You can always email us at successfulparentingplan@gmail.com, and we can forward those on to Candice and Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.